Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Tourism Teacher Talk. This week, I have a guest speaker who is David Gordon, who's come to talk to us all about his experience working as a travel journalist. So, hi, David.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Would you like to start off and just introduce yourself and tell us what's your story?
Okay, well, I mean, basically, outside of travel, I've been doing radio since I was about 11 years old. As soon as I started grammar school, I sort of started into doing radio things with BBC schools and that sort of stuff. So I've always had an interest in the media. And then it sort of materialized then through doing my normal GCSE English coursework and that sort of thing, that I had a flair for creative writing. And one of my teachers at school back then sort of pushed me into the sort of creative writing sphere, if you like, and asked me to talk about a holiday, because we used to go whenever I was younger. We used to go for a holiday in France for a month, usually in July. We sort of took off in our tent and then kept a caravan in later years, and we sort of went down, took up space in a campsite for a month. So I was able to experience life like that for a month every year, which was quite nice. So my teacher asked me to write about it, write a diary. So that's where my sort of creativity sort of started flowing with that, and interest in travel. It then took on a different angle, I guess, when we had an absolutely horrendous holiday back in about, I think it was the year 2000. A package holiday to Florida, which was absolutely abysmal. Terrible trip. We ended actually up going on Holidays from Hell, which was a TV show back at the time about how bad holidays were.
Wow!
And
you have to share the link with us. I'm sure people will be interested in watching that.
It's around in the ether. I've seen it every once in a while sort of turn up on random channels in the middle of the night. You know, it still goes around there. So that really got my interest flowing again, thinking that people like knowing about travel and holidays. So I started writing sort of small features for my local newspaper. About at that stage, I had very young kids, and so the niche became family travel with young children. And that's really where it started from. So that was about 20 years ago now, and I've sort of kept on going since. So I've been writing about travel for quite a while.
Okay, nice. So, here we go. I've taken the liberty of using some of your photos. I hope they're flattering ones.
Yeah, that was a cold one.
I thought this was a great photo. So, tell us a little bit about getting employment and getting into sort of travel writing and travel journalism, and how that might have changed since you started off in the industry.
Well, a big change has been the internet. I mean, I started writing before the internet actually existed, which ages me terribly, I have to say. But, you know, so travel writing as a career has changed incredibly, from writing for a local newspaper to a local audience. You know, in some cases, you could be writing to national newspapers, national magazines, websites, blogs, all sorts of different things. So, the career as such has changed. I guess the problem is thinking of it as a career. You know, travel writing, unless you're the likes of Simon Calder or people who are staff writers, you don't really get a career out of it. You know, because the money isn't great. Unless you're really famous and writing lots of books and that sort of thing. So what you find is a lot of travel writers and travel journalists have different sidelines, the same as I do. You know, I do my radio stuff, I do my voiceovers, I do talks on different things. You know, so you sort of have to have a lot of different fingers in many pies to try and get money coming through. If you'd asked me this before the whole COVID-19 thing, I could have said, you know, how travel writing was such a great career to be in. Since COVID-19, travel writing has fallen through the floor. And I can say that because I'm also a director now of the British Guild of Travel Writers. And we did a survey recently about how our members feel about what the situation is. And there's so many of them came back saying, you know, I haven't had a byline in a newspaper for months. I haven't had, in fact, even personally, I haven't written a travel feature for the best part of a year. In fact, I have one actually going in the paper in the Republic of Ireland this weekend. This is my first byline this year. In fact, my first byline in a year, probably. You know, so as a career, it's going to be interesting to see how it actually builds back up again. for the whole industry. Because everybody's talking about the travel industry building up, but behind that, there's also the whole marketing juggernaut behind that as well, of which travel writing is part. So I think that going forward, there's going to be a lot more of people sort of writing blogs and doing podcasts and more individual things rather than writing as such until everything gets back on its feet again.
Yeah, it's difficult to know as well. And I think in Europe and in the States, a lot of people are sort of seeing the potential rebirth of travel happening quite soon. Whereas where I am in China, it's not happening anytime soon. And that's not just China, it's a lot of Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand. So I think a lot of people who are in your part of the world aren't necessarily thinking about the global tourism industry. And yeah, you might be able to travel to Portugal now and hopefully in a few weeks to Spain and to other places, but you're not going to go on holiday to Singapore or to Australia anytime soon. So whilst it starts recovering, it's not going to be worldwide, is it? So it will be interesting to see what happens. Yeah, certainly.
Well, I think it's the way things have moved. I mean, everybody has suddenly become very insular. I'm here in Northern Ireland, and the number of people, and because of the way the rules all work, we're sort of slightly tied between the UK rules and the Irish rules, and we're sort of in the middle. We don't have very many international flights leaving Belfast at the moment at all. So most people have to travel to London or Manchester or Glasgow or Dublin or wherever, and we're all tied by different rules by the different countries. So a lot of people here in Northern Ireland are staying put, and you cannot get self-catering accommodation here for love nor money at the moment for the summertime. So I think it is going to take, whilst yes, there's people who have their suitcases packed and are ready to jump on the next plane they can get, an awful lot of people seem to be staying quite close to home.
Yeah, well, it's risky, isn't it? You travel and you don't know when things could change. So
that's right.
People are apprehensive, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what if somebody, let's put COVID to one side, assuming that travel comes back in the not too distant future and work can go back to what it was for your average travel writer or travel journalist. What routes into employment are there for anybody who might be considering working in this field?
The way things work now, I think that being creative and showing you have a blog or interest in photography is a major step. Again, most travel writers now have various avenues. I do podcasts. I do the voiceover stuff, and again, that's voiceovers as well for travel companies who are promoting themselves. I do the voiceovers for those as well. Again, so it keeps my link with travel. There are courses out there. There's different colleges do different courses on journalism and creative writing and travel and tourism as well. So if you do actually end up in that sort of road, that's probably the best way to do it, because you have to get a good grounding in being able to write first of all. I mean, there's so many places out there, where it's the top 10 beaches in France, the top 10 restaurants in Spain, whatever. Yes, that serves a purpose. I don't see that as real writing. Writing to me is enveloping the reader in where you are. I started off a piece a couple of years ago. I was in Denver in Colorado, and I started out, the first line of the piece was, "You join me sitting at a coffee table in the middle of the 16th Street Mall in Denver, Colorado." So you're immediately drawing the reader into your story. So being able to tell a good story is really the crux of what you have to do as a travel writer. And so there's many routes into it, but it's the same as slightly off topic, but it's the same as doing radio. You can go and do a degree in media production, but if you can't talk into a microphone, it doesn't actually serve any purpose. If you can't hold the conversation, so it's much the same. You can go and do a degree in writing, a degree in journalism, but if you can't actually see something and tell a story within 15 minutes, it doesn't really serve its purpose. So I think it's a sort of thing you have to research. If you're wanting to write for a particular newspaper, read that newspaper, find out what the audience is for it, because I can go on a trip and maybe get 5 different features out of the one trip. But each of those features has to be couched in a slightly different way because the audience is different for each place. So again, it's having to sort of think outside the box whenever you're wanting to move into that sort of travel writing sphere.
So what would you say is the difference between a travel blogger and a travel journalist?
Well, a travel journalist is somebody who has published. I mean, you could also add in what's a travel writer. A travel writer is someone who's been involved in a book. Some description, so there's really sort of three different prongs to it now. A blogger has quite a wide audience in that they can promote themselves. They can they don't have an editor telling them what to write in many cases. So it's their own website. Whereas a travel journalist and a travel writer is commissioned by a newspaper or a publishing house to write a particular topic. And you have an editor and sub-editors then using your work and sort of changing it slightly and that sort of thing. So a blogger has a lot more freedom, I guess, to do what they want to do. However, they then have to sing for their supper, if you like, and show all their Google Analytics and all those different things that the PR people want to see. And I have to admit, it's an area I don't really know that much about. I've always sort of stuck to my guns and sort of stuck to the travel writing and the travel journalism side. I have my website there, but it's not particularly a blog. It's more of a showcase of what I've done. But there's a lot of people out there who do blogs and do them really well. But they might that has to sort of transpose itself into travel writing, which is a slightly different sphere as well.
Yeah, I mean, I asked that question really because I feel like the sort of boundaries have become a bit blurred, and people kind of move between different areas, and it's just not always that clear. Are you a writer? Are you a blogger? Are you a journalist? So thanks. That's hopefully gives some people a little bit of clarity with that. So what skills and qualifications would you say somebody needs if they want to embark on a career in travel journalism?
Well, I suppose I probably alluded to that a bit earlier when I was thinking about sort of the way you have to be a creative writer. You don't particularly need, I shouldn't maybe say you don't need qualifications, but because I don't have any. But there are people who do the whole writing and journalism thing and get their degree and get their all the qualifications they have. And there's others like me who have done the long haul, if you pardon the pun, and have done this for so long. I mean, I know you can't see it off camera here, but I've got bookcases full of all my old material, which goes back years. And I think having that background is an easy way of showing people what you actually what you've done and what you actually have, and as a history, if you like. But again, the skills come down to being creative and using that one trip. I mean, there's a good one there from Chicago, where I was in Chicago. I was writing a piece for a newspaper, and I thought to myself, this would be good for a podcast. So I had my phone, and a podcast can be as simple as recording something on your phone. It doesn't have to be a full outside broadcast truck with microphones and whatever else. And I went on a walking tour, and as we were walking, I interviewed the tour guide, and that became the podcast, a half-hour trip around Chicago, just as walking around the buildings, So it's that thinking outside the box and being creative is the major skill you need to be involved in the travel writing sphere.
I mean, for me, that's interesting because obviously I do have my own travel blog, and I haven't worked as a travel journalist, and I can see quite a lot of differences in what you're saying to the sort of things I've learned. One of the things I've learned about people who are blogging are a lot of people actually have qualifications in marketing rather than writing. And marketing is such a big part of it, and sort of making your affiliate sales and ranking on Google and SEO and all that sort of stuff. Whereas when you're a travel journalist, I guess you can just focus on being creative and not having to place keywords in certain places, and having, like for example, on a blog, you have to really start off the blog, and in your first line, you're using your keywords. Whereas I guess if you're more of a journalist, you're probably thinking about a more sort of enticing way to introduce the topic, etc. So I think you've probably got a lot more freedom there to be creative.
Yeah, I mean, it's a funny thing because if you're writing a blog, it depends whether you're writing the blog because you just love writing and love travel, or whether you're actually trying to do it to get some sort of money out of it. And again, if you're trying to get the sort of up the analytics ladder, if you like, and get your SEO and your keywords and whatever in, it's for like AdSense and all these sort of sponsored ads and that sort of thing. You do have to do all that. I have never gone down that line, to be perfectly honest. But there's been occasions where I thought maybe I need to do that, but I didn't want to. I suppose in a way I sort of thought of it as diluting what I have done.
Yeah.
But again, I suppose when I'm coming from the age, again, I don't want to age myself too much, but when I come from an age before the internet, it was never really in my sort of world, if you like. So I guess doing the sort of the hard work and doing the journalism side and getting to the big magazines and the newspapers as I've done was the way I had to do it. If I was starting off now, I probably would be totally different. I probably would have a blog and do all that sort of thing. But I actually think it gets to a point, or possibly even an age, where it's actually beyond you. I'm on the wrong side of my mid-40s now to sort of start worrying about it. My one of my sons is now getting into digital marketing because he's 18, turning 19. And he's into the whole digital marketing thing because he's lived with it his entire life, whereas I didn't. So I think there comes a point where you just sort of think that's fine. Let the bloggers do what they do. I want to keep on being a writer and a journalist, which is what I'm doing.
Yeah, and there's definitely a place for that, isn't there? So
yeah. But I don't like. I don't like, as I say, sort of putting it down as an age thing sometimes. But because I know there's plenty of bloggers who are in their 60s and 70s because there's an audience for it. But I think it just depends on how you were brought up and what way you were sort of brought into that digital thing. As I said, it didn't exist when I was starting out, and I suppose it just kept on going the way I knew things.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you. So, thinking about your career in travel journalism, what would you say are the best bits?
Well, the picture's a perfectly good case in point. You get to go to nice hotels and nice places and eat in nice restaurants, and I get to do some interesting things. I mean, I've stayed at some beautiful places. I've done some great trips. I mean, I did a great trip with Amtrak, where I flew into Chicago and then got the train with Amtrak down to Los Angeles, and then up to Santa Barbara and then down to New Orleans on the train. So, I mean, I got to see most of the USA in 3 weeks. Doing that, and sort of seeing the flyover states and then to see all these random places and how big the USA actually is. Get to stay. I mean, that hotel in that picture is actually not too far from where I live. It's the Slieve Donard in Newcastle, County Down. It's a famous hotel. But again, it's one of the 5-star hotels here in Northern Ireland, but it's a beautiful place. I've had random experiences, like I've had coffee with Gunther from Friends on the actual Friends couch. In a random thing, you sort of get. I've met David Hyde Pierce, who played Niles in Frasier, which is always on TV. So you sort of get to do random things as a travel journalist, and you get to see places before they open, and you get to sort of get ahead of the game, if you like. Again in Chicago, I was able to get into the I think it was the Sky. I can't even think what it's called now. It's up at the top of the Sears Tower. It's sort of like a big viewing gallery place, and you sort of walk out onto the glass floor. But I was able to get in there an hour before the public were able to, so I was able to get my photographs and things and get away before. And as I was leaving, there was hundreds of people queuing to get in. So I had the whole place to myself. So you do get nice experiences, as well as getting to see all these places, I get to take people with me, whether it's my wife or my kids or everybody, just depending on what the writing is, because to me, part of the whole thing about travel is the experience. And in my case, it's always best to experience that with somebody because you get to see that through the other person's eyes at the same time. So from a creative point of view, you're getting a couple of different versions of the same trip as well. So there's some good bits, I have to say, about the whole travel writing thing.
So how does it work? Is somebody normally employed full-time by an organisation to write, or would they normally be employed and be just on a part-time basis or ad hoc basis, or do you have to approach? I know it's probably a little bit of all of this, but do most travel writers or travel journalists have to pitch to different organisations to get work? Are you told what stories to work on, or can you just choose? How does it usually work?
The vast majority of travel writers, travel journalists are freelance. There'd be very, very few people who are staff writers anymore, or staff journalists for specifically on travel. What you find is a lot of people in newspapers are maybe feature writers, and travel is part of that. But they could also be writing about health. They could be writing about the courts. They could write about whatever else happens to be there. So a lot of travel writers are freelance, and everybody's sort of on the same thing, trying to pitch a story to an editor. Or and part of the problem with that, I mean, you get invited on lots of press trips, which is one of the nice bits about the career and travel journalism. You get all these trips, invites and things, but what happens is a PR company will come to you and sort of say, love to invite you to X, Y, and Z, if you can get a commission. So then you have to go off to an editor that you know and sort of say, look, I've been invited in this. Would you be able to commission me to write this? And then they'll turn around and say, well, actually, I have 6 other people have sent me the same email this morning. Why are you any different? So these sort of round robin emails don't really help very much. So what you try and then have to do is avoid the press trips, or I avoid the press trips and to do individual stuff. And I go off and find my own things and sort of put that to somebody at an editor level, and then they bite, and then they commission you and whatever. So it is a bit of a strange one. There's a lot of newspapers now are even saying we don't accept stories that have resulted from press trips. I think it's through the whole ethical tourism thing, because they're sponsored trips and they're paid for by the tourist board, or they're paid for by the hotel. So you're not going to be able to give an honest review, if you like, because you sort of feel beholden to whoever's sponsored it, which isn't always the case. I've done a few press trips where I haven't really been that complimentary of places, but
I think even if you didn't have the best experience and you're honest about that, that's great. But they might make sure you have the best experience because they know you're writing about it,
Well,
so
yeah,
that's as well.
That's true, because I mean, it's
great, but is that representative of your average tourist experience?
Well, yeah, I mean, and sometimes you feel like the royal family, where everything smells of fresh paint. Because there's somebody going in front of you cleaning everything, so you don't get the full experience. Because I mean, what happens on a press trip, you could end up on a coach with 14 other travel journalists from all over Europe, or wherever you happen to be, and you're all experiencing the same thing at the same time. The people know you're coming, and so everything's spick and span and great, and service is incredible. If you're going independent, like I normally do, they don't really know you're there. So you get to experience things the way Joe Public gets to experience it. So I've sort of gone away from that. I suppose that, when I was younger, the group press trip thing was great because you couldn't afford to do anything otherwise. You couldn't afford to do it. But I've now got to the stage where I can support myself and support my own trips. And then I by way of I would mention to the tourist board or whatever that I'm going to be there, but I don't really particularly seek anything major out, if you know what I mean. I sort of go and do my own thing and then write about it, because that gives a proper, honest approach. But as I said, there's a lot of newspapers are now don't particularly like the group press trip idea, and they won't accept your work if it's been done as part of a press trip. So you have to sort of, again, take that on board sometimes, depending on where you want to write for too.
Interesting, thank you. So then, on the other side, what would you say are the downsides to working as a travel journalist?
The lack of money would be a big one. I think that people have this concept that travel writers get paid to travel the world, and sort of see places and do all this thing. But I mean, when you get paid, or if you get paid, you're getting paid to talk to people, to research, to seek stuff out, and then obviously to take time to write 1,000 or 1,500 words or more about whatever you're visiting. So that's really what you're paid for. You're not paid to sit in nice hotels and eat nice meals and that sort of thing. But when I say paid, again, it depends. I mean, the amount you get per word fluctuates drastically. In some cases, people don't pay anything at all for travel writing anymore. Particularly if you think it's been sponsored and you've got there for free. But then, I've never got a trip. I've never had a trip where it hasn't cost me anything. I think I've always had the case, even if it was an organized trip, we've always had to pay something along the way, whether it's your airport parking or your trip to the airport and all that sort of stuff, because that's not looked after. So a long time ago, I just took the decision then to stop doing that. And so if I'm doing a trip now, I'd pay for my own flights, or whoever's going with me will pay for our flights, and might get help assistance from the tourist board when we're there, with you might get discounted rooms or something like that. But I don't particularly look for totally free all the time, because I don't think it's fair, especially nowadays when things are going to be a lot different, I think, moving forward. So I think if you're able to show you're investing in their product, it'll help everybody at the end of the day. So if you're putting your own money into the trip, I think that stands you in better stead these days. So
yeah, I know this is a topic of conversation amongst bloggers as well, because a lot of people go for these hosted stays and they get free entry to a lot of places and things like that. But that's quite a controversial topic these days.
Yeah, it is, and again, but that's where the blogger thing started, because a lot of people saw this is a free ticket to get nice stuff, but and again, maybe that's another difference between bloggers and journalists, where, as I say, I do my best to pay a fair bit of the trip myself, and whatever we're doing, and I chose that investment, whereas you might find bloggers who don't have that same income or whatever aren't able to do that, therefore they're looking for the free trip. I remember being on a trip years ago, and it was an American journalist who was literally on a free trip around Europe, but they spent that long organizing the next part of their trip. They didn't really know where they were going, but they didn't really enjoy where they were, because they were thinking about where am I going next. So and they were sort of bouncing around hotels all over Europe for like 3 or 4 months, which was a strange concept at the time. I just couldn't figure it out. But they were doing it, but they were working. But then I discovered they were actually writing stuff for other websites, and they were copywriting and all sorts of things at the same time to finance their trip. So it wasn't. But so they were looking for free hotels, but they could still get paid at the same time. So I think it's one of those situations where people have to make the most of what they've got. As I say, it's a good career, but there are downsides to it, where you do see everything with, especially on a group trip, you sort of see everything fresh and everything's clean and everything's ready. You don't get to see the real place. I always advise people to get lost, and I mean that in the nicest possible way. If you go off somewhere, try and get off the beaten track. And my wife and I had a lovely trip to Paris a couple of years ago, and we didn't go anywhere near the Eiffel Tower. We didn't go anywhere near the big places. We took ourselves off into the third arrondissement, up to the Canal Saint-Martin, and just wandered down the canal where people actually live. It's not a tourist area at all of Paris, and we just wandered. I ended up back down at the River Seine again, down at the Pont de Neuf and whatever. But we had a lovely morning just wandering and finding cafes to go and sit at, and it was a proper place. It wasn't a tourist thing at all, because you find that tourists always sort of have their own, what's the word I'm looking for, their own world, I guess, when they go traveling somewhere, and you're sort of surrounded by other tourists. You never really get to see people and real people, so it's always good to go and get lost. So it's one of those strange things about travel, especially travel journalism. You're always looking for something around the next corner.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. I also love getting lost and seeing things off the beaten path. I did a talk a couple of weeks ago. It was about experiential travel. So if anybody is interested in that, you can have a look on YouTube. I'll have to find the link for you. But I think that's getting lost and it exposing yourself in that way is a often form of experiential travel. So if that's something you're interested in, then I will send you the link. So next question. Can you tell me a little bit more about your website, David Gordon's Travel Bites?
Yeah, well, I mean, that started about 2012. That's actually, my goodness, nearly 10 years ago now. And Travel Bites started because I was talking about travel. I was talking about restaurants and things. So I sort of put the two together to get the Travel Bites idea, because I was talking about restaurant and hotel reviews and travel reviews and that sort of thing. But the podcast, I mean, again, I always found myself sort of ahead of the game slightly, where I was Travel Bites podcast was one of the first travel podcasts in Ireland. And that was really because of my love of radio and my love of travel. I sort of thought, well, let's try this together and see what happens. And it was mainly because I'd been involved and had been working for a long time with an American radio travel show and an Australian travel show, which were both doing podcasts at the time. So we ended up actually sharing audio between each of the three shows. So we're getting different parts of the different shows in my podcast, and vice versa. So I ended up with, I think at the minute there's like 107 episodes of Travel Bites up there. There's over 100,000 downloads with over 500,000 listens, and so it sort of took off by itself. So I mean, it sort of developed over time. So I ended up with, and I did it as a radio show rather than as a podcast initially, which meant it was then taken up by 20 different community radio stations around the UK, Ireland, and France, in fact, as well as the American and Australian outlets. So the show was broadcast in its entirety as an hour-long program once a week on 20 different radio stations. So that also helped with the getting up the Google stats a bit as well. So the podcast sort of sits there by itself now. I don't really do it as much as I used to. I've sort of moved more into the video blogs and that sort of thing, just as technology has moved on. But so it's always there, because I mean, the way I did it was it's evergreen material, and it allows you then to sort of mean that episode number 1 is just as valid now as it was 9 years ago. So it's an interesting concept that has worked for me. And people now know David Gordon's Travel Bites as an entity in itself, which is nice. So whenever I go to places, random places, conferences and things I've turned up at, and people said, "Oh, I heard your podcast and such," and it's nice that people know the brand. And that's, you talked about marketing earlier, and that's part of the thing as well, the marketing of yourself. Which as a travel writer and blogger, whatever you are, that's what you have to do. You have to keep marketing yourself and being in the conversation, whether that's on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or this sort of thing as well.
And that's something that I think a lot of people find quite challenging, is sort of promoting themselves and saying that they think their work is good. Because a lot of people are, especially us from Britain, I think we're not necessarily that way inclined. We're a bit more, I don't know, what's the word? Introverted?
Yeah.
Reserved. Yeah.
I think that's right. I mean, I could sell you Northern Ireland as a tourist destination for the next hour and a half, but I can't really sell myself, which is right. It's a strange thing. So it's, but again, I think it's one of those things where you do have to sort of think outside the box and think about different ways of challenging your knowledge, I guess, which is why I'm doing things like talking to you and talking to the education side of things, and because I suppose I've 20 plus years of travel experience up in here, and it might as well be put to use somewhere. And that's the way I look at it, and it's a good, it does stand you in good stead. I mean, the fact I'm now a director of the British Guild of Travel Writers, which is a great organisation for travel journalists and bloggers as well, and broadcasters and podcasters too. Because it's a great networking tool, and I became a member a couple of years ago and became a director this year. So I'm the director of development for that now as well, which again is great for a business card, I have to say. It certainly opens doors, and but again, it shows you have the experience and the stability behind you as well.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much for answering those questions. Do you have any other last remarks or things you'd like to add before we wrap it up?
Well, I mean, I suppose the only last remark would be, that travel and tourism is a great industry to be in. It's such a fascinating. There's so many facets to it, I think, is the great thing, especially for students who are coming through at the moment. Where I always tell people the world is your oyster. You don't, and always think, of places you want to be, and sort of give yourself goals as well. Where do you want to be in 5 years' time? You're studying this now. Where do you want to be in 5 years' time? Do you want to be a hotel manager? Do you want to be a holiday rep? But sort of try and build your career path. And find your niche as well. If you especially in the blogging and the writing side, if you get a niche that nobody really is covering, then you can fly with it.
So I think those are finding a niche is not as easy as it used to be, because so many people seem to be doing this these days.
Create one for yourself.
Oh yeah. Well, thank you very much. That was really interesting, and I'm sure really helpful for anyone who is thinking about a career in travel journalism or travel writing. So next week we have another talk on Monday, so it's only a few days' time, and we've got Pan Durang, he is going to talk to us all about sustainable tourism and entrepreneurship in terms of agritourism. So that's tourism that involves agriculture. So this is a type of niche tourism. So hopefully that'll be quite interesting. It is a growing type of tourism, and he's going to tell us all about his organisation that is promoting that. And that is on Monday, the 7th of June at 5:15 China time, 10:15 UK time. And for anyone following, here are my social media links. I am uploading all of these talks onto YouTube, so you can watch them back if you want to. Please do subscribe. It's a new YouTube channel. I'm trying to grow it. So please do subscribe, click like, etc. Share with your students or your friends and whatever. So thank you very much. And we'll keep in touch, and we'll look if anyone's got any comments. I don't think there were any questions. A couple of people said hello, but no specific questions really. So if anybody does have any questions, I'm sure that David will be able to answer them. So just drop them down in the comments whenever you're ready. So thank you very much, David, and we will speak soon.
Thank you.